Hi, so I had no intention of doing a video tonight, but this weekend, I'll just give a bit of a backstory. So this weekend, normally I'd go to my comic shop, pick up my comics, but I thought, no, I go through weird phases with my comic reading. Some weeks I just devour superhero comics, and other weeks it can be like 2000 AD, just pure 2000 AD, reading the book, the collections, the comics, etc. And then there's other times, which is this time, where I want to read a graphic novel that I've had for ages. I've read it before many, many years ago, and it's a challenging read. It's not an easy read. It's a read where you have to save at each page, where you have to spend a few days just focusing on that and nothing else, no distractions. And that's what I was in the mood for this weekend, and I think I'm still in that mood at the moment. It could last for a few weeks, so I'm just going to basically read the books on my shelf what really, really challenged me, which I feel like I'm growing a brain cell after I've read it, if that makes any sense. And one of these books is Luther Arkwright, which is created, written, illustrated, and the initial first volume is lettered as well by Brian Talbot. And so far there's been 3 books. So I've read the first book, which is The Adventures of Luther Arkwright, which I think initially the first part of it came out in 1982, and then he it was in magazine in a like serialized in a serialized story in an anthology called Near Myths, and then Anthology magazine took it over. I think that only lasted about 1 issue, 2 issues, and then there was a gap, and then he released those chapters that he'd done in one of the very earliest graphic novels, especially for a UK graphic novel, which I actually picked. I actually had an issue of Pissed. I think that was from about 1982, 83. And then I got the graphic novel collection, which was about 1984 when I picked that up. I was very young. I was about 13, 14 at the time. I've always gone... I've always wanted... This is really very long-winded introduction. I've always liked comics that were on the periphery, that weren't... I love mainstream stuff as well, but I've always had an attraction to underground comics or to things like Heavy Metal magazine, Epic Illustrated, self-published independent comics, anything that wasn't the norm. Like when ElfQuest was a black and white comic, I had to hunt for that. The old Spirits Warren magazines and stuff like this, Kitchen Sink, all stuff like that in the early 80s. That was my developmental growth when I was a young teenager. Including, that's when I first discovered things like the Fabulous Fairy Freak Brothers and Robert Crumb and stuff like that. So this was right in my wheelhouse. But then, this is a very long introduction. I do apologise. I think I've already apologised twice already. So there's a gap then, but then is a... I don't know if he said. I don't know if he created his own publishing house, or if it was an independent publisher called Valkyrie Press, and they did comic format, American comic size format, but a UK publisher, and they repackaged. So they reprinted in a monthly comic format the stories that have been collected in that graphic novel collection, and then he also carried on the storyline. So it's like a 9-issue series at the end of it. And it was interesting because his growth as an artist you could see as well. Because when he started in the early 80s, he was more like doing British underground comics. And then a few years after that, about 84, was when he started doing work for 2000 AD. So he did like a lot of Nemesis, which some of my favourite 2000 AD artwork, where he did like this steampunk version of Nemesis, the Warlock. And then obviously, because the 9-issue series carried on until 1989, and that's when he started doing work for DC. Most famously, The Sandman. He did quite a lot of Sandman stories. So you can see his growth in these 9 issues of his journey as an artist. But then there's a gap, and then it got reprinted in America by Dark Horse Comics, and that's when it really exploded everywhere. And that gave him enough funding to do a sequel, which was Heart of Empire, and which is what this cover's taken from, which was different to the first one because it was in full colour, so there wasn't as much dense black and white artwork. The black and white artwork was gorgeous, so it sacrificed some of its intricacy, but the colouring's beautiful as well. So there's a big leap forward in art style, and that I think went on for about, I can't remember, about 8 issues or 9 issues or something like that. I think it was 10 issues actually. So that was the second volume, and then there's a gap of about 15 years, if not more, and he created a completely original hardback graphic novel called The Legend of Luther Arkwright, which came out a few years back. I've not read this yet, so I will be. So he's gone back to his old black and white style, but his art style has changed a lot. So we will be looking into that more later on. But what I want to focus on is the first book, Adventures of Luther Arkwright. So this is going to be a 3-part video series. So I'll be doing a review of Adventures of Luther Arkwright. And then once I've read it, it could take a few months because I'm not going to I don't want to overdose just on the same comic series. So my next thing to read will be Heart of Empire. I'll do a video for that, and then eventually we'll come to the final one so far, Legend of Luther Arkwright. But it's interesting because with this you can see his growth, and then it's his growth as a storyteller as well, not just as an artist, because this spurred him on to move away from doing work for hire, and he started doing his own creative projects. So he did Tale of One Bad Rat, which was amazing. He's done Granville, which was anthropomorphic, Victoriana, steampunkish detective thriller. And he's done one about the story of Alice Liddell, who was the influence for Alice in Wonderland. And he's done about a number of different original graphic novels, and they've all won accolades. He's become huge in France, Angoulême, Spain, everywhere where comics are big. He's made it. He's not just focused on the English market. He's not just focused on the American market. He's made his name across the board where comics are treated as a serious art form. But let's look at this first book. Like I said, this started in the early 80s, and that was the cover for the first collection of the first story. But he's one of my all-time favourite artists. I just think he's so good. It was from a period when, in the 80s, a lot of this style of black and white art was done because it was cheaper to... You could, as an independent artist and writer, financially afford to do a black and white series. So because it was no colour, they would focus on making the art as intricate and heavily detailed as possible. And it could mean that you could wait months for the next issue, but it was worth the payoff. And what's interesting with this, and I'll come back to why, it's got an introduction here by one of my favourite authors. I know Geeky or Hog loves this author, Michael Moorcock of Elric fame, and another character which I'll, again, is very important for this series. So this from about 1982, 81, 82 when he did this first part of it. But even still, let's just focus. You can see the detail and the intricacies of his artwork. And this is when he'd be a young man as an artist. He'd only be in his 20s. So I was saying about why it's interesting that Michael Moorcock's in the introduction. This owes more to Michael Moorcock's style of science fiction, where it's the Eternal Warrior, more precisely Jerry Cornelius, who was his like everyman kind of character who came back in multiple forms, where he'd be a secret agent 1 minute, next minute he'd be doing this time-spanning, time-hopping, parallel universe hopping adventure, and next minute he'd be a hermaphroditic god, and all types of things. And that's very much in flavour of this. So what's interesting with this series, it's so advanced for such a young writer at the time. There's all these little bars with like these numbers and that lot. It deals... This is, I think, the first story that seriously deals with multiverses in comics as a serious subject, and not just once you can cram as many variations of a superhero in. So as the story progresses, there's parallels going on in other parallel worlds, and it gives you like news snippets of what's going on in these other worlds. So this opens up with with these people being assassinated, and he's just coolly watching like his work. And so it turns this is our main character, Luther Arkwright, and he's basically what we presume at the beginning to be a secret agent, like a trans-dimensional secret agent for this um, shadowy service who are like in between the parallel worlds. They basically monitor all the parallel worlds to make sure that things fit and to correct any mistakes. Kind of in a way what Marvel have tried to do with the Thor MCU universe, where they've got that time agency. So it jumps about from different worlds, different timescales. So it jumps to Egypt in the early 1900s. And initially, it's a bit of a headfuck, I'm not going to lie, and because then it jumps to giving more background of who Luther Arkwright is. And as you can see, this, like I said, this artist when he was in his early 20s, just stunning, absolutely stunning. And it jumps to this parallel where he's having a duel, and it's like an alternate historical novel, like a alternate history, that kind of sci-fi trope. But it's everything about it is just like historically precise, and then there's something that's weird, like he's got this gun that can send out like psionic signals and stuff like this, and he can probe people's minds. But just look again. Let's just do look at the detail. So it jumps again more to his backstory. I just want to. I'm going to skim over a lot of the story because you really do need to read it. The reason that I wanted to do this is the last time I read this was at least 25 years ago, and I wanted to see if I would enjoy it as much now. Because it's funny, when I was younger, I could read more challenging stuff than I do now as I'm older, if that makes sense. And I'm trying to reignite my love of complicated stuff, of dense stories which pay off if you carry on with them. And I'm pleased to say I've got my mojo back. So that's one thing I'm really happy about. But again, just look at the detail of this. So it now focuses on this is like the main crux of the story now for the majority of the 9 issues which make up this graphic novel collection. Um, this character here, she's a Russian agent, and she's called Octobriana, and this was actually an underground comic character, which I think has become like public domain, and it's great. There's a lot of sex in this, I will say. But again, just look at the detail. Absolutely fantastic. So, and again, it jumps again. A lot of time displacement. It's like I said, it's a bit of headfuckery, bit confusing initially, but you get into the rhythm of it eventually. It does not hold your hand. You really do need to take your time. Sometimes you need to flick back a page, but once you get into the rhythm of it, it makes so much sense. But as I was saying, the main story focuses on this parallel Earth where um, Cromwell won the war, the royalists lost, and so Cromwell's lineage has basically ruled Britain for over 300 years. So it's all these descendants of Cromwell, and this is what they're trying to fix. They're realizing this is an anomaly, and so this is Luther Arkwright's mission, where he's got to basically put a stop to this because it's just become like this. Britain's just become like this huge fascist state. You can't have nude, you kind of figure, sculptures, you kind of, because that's idolatry, you kind of paintings and stuff like this. But again, let's just look at these pages. And like I said, keeps jumping back to his backstory. It's a really, really clever, ingenious way. And there's this character here called Hiram, who's from America, very much like I'm getting brain farts. The Daredevil's news reporter. You know who I mean. It's late. It's nearly 11 o'clock. I just had to do this. So he's like giving his news reporter what's going on. So he's basically been like our eyes for the impression that people get with Luther Arkwright. What I will say is curious with this. I'm kind of pleased they didn't, because the initial, I think it's like the first three issues. But again, just look at this page, the detail in that. The lettering is very small. It's very dense. There's a lot of verbiage in the first three issues that make up the first quarter of the book. And obviously, when this was first created, there was no such thing as computer lettering, so he did it all by hand, and sometimes it gets lost in the art. But I'm pleased they didn't do anything to replace it, because I think it'd lose some of its purity. But can look at these. We go on about the Absolute Batman art, how they could fit like lots of panels onto a single page. Brian Talbot was doing that 40 years before that even came out. So you get these snippets from the report what Hiram is giving back to his American newspaper. And so it's basically this tale of this parallel world, the formation of a revolution to basically depose of Cromwell. This is Cromwell, the descendant of the original Oliver Cromwell. This is just perfect alternate history. This is really, really superb. And the art is amazing. He he does not pander to you. He doesn't basically spell everything out for you, but it helps. It makes you piece the pieces of the puzzle together yourself. But this is just like this psychobabble here. It's basically paid. It's basically 4 or 5 pages of him just having sex and having multiple orgasms, and how it's like he's basically equating it to like a religious experience. And I just kind of like speed read through these because I think you meant to. It's just like psychobabble as what you're experiencing, how your brain gets triggered. But again, just look at this. These must have taken forever to do. So we now jump to the next phase, and he does not hold back on that. Luther Arkwright is basically Christ. He's the chosen one. He's the one who can save this world because he basically is God. And it makes no hold, but it doesn't hold anything back about that. But again, look at this. Right, so you got this action scene. So you got Luther Arkwright leaping over his. So he's in prison. He leaps over, escapes, and then it shifts to him walking through this country scene. Just look at the arts, and it's like a photograph. It's just so beautiful. There's very few artists who can do this. I'd say one who was up to this standard of detail would be Michael Zulli, and also Gerhard, who did the backgrounds for Dave Sims' Cerebus. So he's now come. So basically, what happened was Luther Arkwright got captured. He got shot, but he didn't fully, and he went to like this catatonic state. They tortured him, and they thought, "Oh, he's dead. That's it." But that was basically the triggering effect for him to create his new self, and that's where you saw that, where he's like basically doing this like Christ-like pose. So he's come back. He's basically become his other self now. So all his body hair's gone. Very I just wonder how much of this, if Alan Moore read this, because it's very Dr. Manhattan. So there's no body hair. He's he's having flashbacks to his other selves, to events that have gone before and gone forward. So, like I said, very, very Dr. Manhattan. But this, like I said, came out roughly the same time, if not a bit earlier. But you can tell with here, this is like the second part or the later part of the story. So his art style is much more refined now. The lettering's improved, and another thing you'll notice as well, he's learnt that less is more in the writing. He's found his feet. This is where it cements him as a writer, artist. This is just gorgeous. I literally spent. I just took my time. It's only a short book. It's 214 pages or something like that. But and I read it over 3 days. But yeah, it's because if you rush through, you miss certain things. Like this carries on for the next number of pages as he's going to go and basically starts his mission. Basically, finish the mission what he set out to do, which was to get rid of Cromwell. So it carries on to this page, this page, this page. So the clouds are getting heavier now. This page, his body's just there. There he is there. Everything's in place. All the ones who sided with the royalists, are now amassed an army who wanted to fight back against the fascist Puritans who basically dominated England for 300 years. Lots of things have gone on there as well. I don't want to go into that. Like I said, I'm only giving you the bare bones because it's a very dense story and you do need to read it. This, for me, is such an iconic page. I adore this page. Look at the detail. Look at that. So you've got Luther Arkwright flying through. You've got the church. You've got the clouds. It is gorgeous. And so he reaches destination. He smashes through the window, and then there's just these. It's almost like a John Woo film where everything is in slow motion, and he goes by his task of assassinating the puritanical leaders. And that brings about a change to the world. And that's when you think, oh, that's where the story's going to end. But no, that's just the beginning of Luther Arkwright's evolution. This reminds me very much of that storyline in Miracle Man, the original Miracle Man storyline, with young Miracle Man or Kid Miracle Man, whatever it's called, when it became the evil version, when it just became like this page and page and page, like torture fighting. It's like the most extreme fights, and you can see. And this is what happens here. It shows the brutality from both sides, from the Puritans to the Royalists. But that's by the by now. This now moves on to Luther Arkwright's next stage in his evolution. So it turns out there's this other force as well who are trying to not take over that parallel Earth, but take over um, the whole of the parallels, all of the multiverse. It's fucking complicated to explain like this. And so I think so. It's got this two contrasting storylines now. So you've got this going on, which Luther's involved in, but then you've also got this other scene here, which Luther's also involved in because he can time jump and universe jump. And so it goes from being like this alternate history story to being this cold, hard sci-fi story. You've got spaceships, and then it goes cosmic, basically God, and God's basically saying that Luther is him and Luther is Christ. goes like to the ultimate point you can get with that kind of storyline, and it comes back to Earth with a bang. And like I said, a fucking load of other stuff happens in it, but I want to keep this to about half an hour. And so that finishes the first adventure of Luther Arkwright. And these were the covers for the reissues from Dark Horse. So whenever I read it, hopefully soon, I want to move on to something else just to cleanse my palate for a bit. Another book challenge one. It might be a Rick Veitch book or an Alan Moore book. But this, just to give you a preview, this will be the next book, Heart of the Empire. And as I was saying, the art style changes a hell of a lot. But in a good way, he's leaving room for the colours this time. He's as accomplished as he is in doing his black and white artwork. So I highly recommend. I think it's still available from booksellers, but if not, do check out eBay or see if you can still find it. But it comes from my highest recommendation. Luther Arkwright's been in my life since 1982 in various formats. I've had it in all formats. When I got divorced and when I lost over 1,000 books, I lost over 1,000 graphic novels, and I lost my whole comic collection because I literally could not. I didn't have anywhere to keep my books because I had no home. I had to move back to my dad's for a bit. So while I was licking my wounds and that lot, I had to say goodbye and sell all my stuff. But when I got myself sorted, got myself financially stable, got my own place, even though it's small, it's mine. One of the first books I ever bought back in physical format, because I read digitally for ages because I literally didn't have any room for books. This was one of the first books I got about, what was it, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. Because I needed Luther back in my life. He was a turning point in my comic reading life as a young child, as a 12, 13-year-old. It made me realise there's more to comics than just superheroes and things like comedy comics as well. And I highly recommend give it a try. Give yourself a bit of patience. Put some time aside. When you get past like the first 40 or 50 pages, you get hooked. If you don't get hooked, then it's not for you. But I got hooked again. I've read this a number of times, but like I said, it's been 25 years since I last read it. And oh my God, it builds up to such a crescendo at the end. Not many books leave me breathless with each page as it progresses. This did, because I've forgotten quite a chunk of it. And the revelations and the reveals and the twists and turns and jumping backwards and forwards, the payoffs are huge. And he's just one of the coolest characters ever created. I mean, look at that costume. It's just fantastic. Brian Talbot, for me, is one of the best comic writers / artists we've ever had. He's just a genius. So it gets my highest gold star approval. It's a perfect 10 out of 10. And I recommend you try them all. Okay, so like I said, the next book will be coming hopefully in the next few weeks. And then once I've done that, I'll read the final book. Okay, bye.